You're listening to the Business Communicators, presented by IABC Houston. And now your hosts, Austin Stenton, Hattie Horn, and Thomas Bain.
Welcome to Season 3, Episode 22 of The Business Communicators, a podcast presented by IABC Houston. My name is Austin Stenton, joined alongside my co-host Hattie Horn on this journey as we explore the world of communications and discuss the key issues and trends that impact our industry. And you might notice there's someone missing this week, and that is Thomas Bain. Unfortunately, he has decided to leave the podcast. Just kidding. No, he's actually looking at a home right now, and it conflicted with the time that we were recording this podcast. But to make up for Thomas's absence, we've got a great guest on today's show, and Hattie does an amazing interview with Jodi-Ann Burey. And if you're not familiar with her, she's a TEDx speaker on the myth of bringing your full authentic self to work. And I love her website, which, it gives her, her three words, if you will, which are speaker, writer, and disruptor. And Hattie, I'm really looking forward to hearing this conversation. But outside of that, how's your week been? How's everything going, Hattie?
It's going well. And I'm really excited, but I was just preparing because I'm really excited to talk to Jody. Every time I talk to her, I always get a nugget of something new. We always have fun. And I'm sorry that Thomas is not here. He would really like this conversation. But next time, Thomas.
Well, I wish I could, be a part of the conversation with Jody. I mean, she's just got a fascinating background. I know it's going to be a great conversation. Fortunately, I had a work conflict when you guys were recording. But it's an interview that I'm really interested in hearing. And, I've watched her TEDx before, and I think she's got great insights. And, I would just encourage you guys to follow her. If you're on Twitter, just search Jodi-Ann_B. And then, of course, you can go to her website, Jodi-Annburey.com, and we'll link those in the show notes below for this podcast. But if you want to follow our work, I would recommend that, search us on social media. Just search @BizCommunicator, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. We're on every single platform there is, except TikTok. We'll get there eventually, but we're not on TikTok. And of course, you can visit our website, thebusinesscommunicators.com, or shoot us an email to podcast@ibchouston.com. But Hattie, why don't we just get into the interview with Jody? I'm really looking forward to it. So it's time for our interview, I guess Hattie's interview with Jodi-Ann Burey. So it's time to sit back, relax, and be informed.
You're listening to the Business Communicators.
Tell people a little bit about yourself, because one of the things that really stands out for me is your mission statement. You're disrupting business as usual to achieve social change. And that is such a powerful statement.
Yeah.
What compelled you to be on this journey?
It's interesting. When I came up with that, I was really, I'm from New York, and I believe firmly in direct and authentic communication. And I was really struggling to figure out what is one statement that encapsulates how I've showed up professionally. And particularly, how can I reframe ways that I've been judged somewhat negatively for how I show up, and how can I turn that around as something that is actually the thing that you should want, what you should be striving for. You want someone to be disruptive, right? We want to create change within our organizations, within how we do things, in order to have the outputs that we want. Because when it comes to racial equity, issues around gender or ability, sexual orientation, what have you, if we do nothing, the path is always inequity, growing inequity, bias, discrimination. That is the path that we're on. So in order to change the way we do business, we have to be disruptive. And so that, to me, when I hear it back to me, I can see myself sitting in the conference room or in a classroom where I have to say something. Whatever you thought was going to be on the agenda today, I have to disrupt the business as usual to see if we can change how we're making decisions, to change, what our goals are, so we can reduce the amount of inequity and discrimination that's already baked into how we do our business.
Well, and you have a TEDx that I thought was really, really good, that almost has 1 million listeners.
I know.
Watchers. That is awesome. Do you know
It'll be a couple days, and when it hits 1 million, then I'm not going to look at it anymore. But when I realized that oh my God, like it can get to 1 million. I check it more times than I'm going to want to publicly admit.
Yeah, but well, the thing is for me is that, and I actually watched it when it was right at 500,000 or before 500,000.
Yeah.
So, and that wasn't that long ago.
No.
And what's really interesting to me is that people really want to know what this means when you say, there's a myth about bringing your full authentic self to work. For others, change can be so uncomfortable for them. Could you share recommendations with our listeners on how they can be agents of change and helping employees, or enabling, or whether they're working with their leaders that can help employees feel comfortable about, or confident about bringing their full selves to work? Or do you think that's something that'll never happen?
Yeah, I think if I were to say that would never happen, that would put me outside of the tradition of the communities that I come from, that always had to hope for, plan for, put seeds to create, change that maybe was outside of the realm of possibility for their own lives. And so I have to believe that at some point, being able to fully show up as who you are and have that be valued in all aspects of your life is possible. When that happens is up to us. I think we've seen in the past year that the ability to talk about race and racism has exponentially changed. I remember getting in trouble for saying things at work that now in the past year, in the wake of George Floyd's murder, people are saying out loud and a lot and actually being heard and listened to. And so I think if we want change to be possible in the short term, all of that is within the realm of possibility. Like that can happen. As leaders, managers, people who make decisions, if you want to leverage the full excellence and expertise of your employees, no matter what life experience that they have, it is up to you to create the environment within which they can be themselves. Because we use this narrative around bringing your full authentic self as a way to look at folks who are underrepresented, to brave their workspaces, unmasked or uncovered. And then when they do that, then they don't get the promotions, they don't get the social capital, they get negative performance reviews, like it becomes some tension or problem when they're just doing the thing that you asked. And so if you want to leverage people's full genius without them spending all this energy trying to hide parts of themselves, it's up to you to create that environment. And so what does that environment look like? I think the primary goal is to normalize multiple norms, right? People have different social styles, and we need to create space to see the value in their social styles. We need to understand the ways that our systems are structured to allow people who are male, people who are white, people who are tall, there are all these biases in, how people are able to advance professionally. We value, for example, people who can think and speak at the same time versus people who think first and then they speak. We have a culture that creates opportunities for people who show up in a certain way. And so if we can understand different ways that we evaluate our employees and reward them for difference, look at differences and seek that as a way that you can, have better products, have better productivity, have better business ideas, what have you. I think that is definitely the path. Yeah. Good luck.
Well, so for instance, I'm a professional communicator.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to, if I wanted to, this is just a scenario.
Okay.
As a professional communicator, you always want to be able to talk to your leaders or advise or counsel your leaders in a way that you're not just communicating to one type of audience. You're communicating to all types of audiences. In other words, you don't want to be exclusive. You want to be inclusive. And there are leaders who actually believe that they're doing a good job of doing that. How would you advise someone, a professional communicator, who has a leader who's not quite there yet, to help their leader get to a place where they're at least almost there or there in that place? What are some scenarios or you can recommend, or some ideas?
Yeah, I think and I think this could be difficult for communication folks. I also have a communications background, is that we believe that information can change behavior. That's a very seductive idea, that if I know better, I can do better. And that someone's, I don't want to say bad behavior, but opportunities for someone to change their behavior are linked by the level of information that they have. That is not true. There are a lot of people who know a lot of things and their behaviors don't follow through. So I always use this example, like most people who smoke cigarettes or smoke cigars know that cigarette smoke and cigars are not advantageous for your health. That information does not compel them to change their behaviors. We've been in COVID-19 quarantine for a long time. And I know there are a lot of people that, want to restart their relationships to their physical fitness and their bodies. They know what they should be doing, but to change our behaviors, to have the goals that we want, that's not necessarily the thing that shifts that behavior. So I think if you're a communications person and you have a leader who wants to speak to different audiences, is sharing the values around that, I don't think the route is this person needs more information in order to come around. I think what's important is to look at how that leader makes decisions, what opportunities are there that maybe nudge them in one way versus the other. To go back to a workout example, one of the hacks that I have is I always leave like sneakers at the door. There's like this visual reminder, like, hey girl, you need to go for a run. Right? But if I had the sneakers like in the back closet underneath all of this stuff, it would be really difficult, even though I want to do the behavior, even though I know that this behavior is right, the sneakers are so far away, it disincentivizes me to proceed with that behavior, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you look at your leader and say, okay, who's around them a lot? Who's advising them? What's their meeting schedule? Like, how are we prioritizing, different aspects of the business? A lot of times when people look at diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, they say that we're failing, it's not working. Well, you have 10,000 people who work at your company and you have one person who's working part-time on diversity and inclusion efforts. Of course, that is structurally not sound, right? Right. So I think like looking at your leader and saying, you want to speak to different audiences. Okay, why? Who are those audiences? What are the aspects of our work that are speaking to this particular audience? What are the aspects of our work that are not? And I think as we talk about audiences, especially when we talk about like social issues and racial equity and stuff, there's this sense that if we speak to a more left-leaning, quote unquote, but if we speak to folks who want to see racial equity, right? I don't care if you're left, right, whatever. If racial equity is your goal, if we want to speak to those issues, I think a lot of leaders might be hesitant because they're afraid they're going to lose an audience that, thinks that you're being too political or thinks that, you're being whatever. But it's important to focus on what do you gain by focusing on racial equity or these social issues that you care about? What are the possibilities that are open if you double down on that? And I think there are a lot of companies that have proven that you can be very vocal about social issues. You can speak to audiences that care about those issues, and losing other audiences or deprioritizing other audiences is actually not as risky as you might think.
I'm glad that you brought up leaders talking about social issues. In a previous episode, our co-host talked with Tanya Reese, who is the architect of the Edelman Trust Barometer. And in a part of that data revealed that employees don't trust government, and they trusted their leaders more. So from your perspective, and it already sounds like you think this is the case, this is an opportunity for leaders to talk about the things that you say their employees care about, whether it's social justice. But and I've seen statements out there after the verdict of Derek Chauvin, some of them a little, well, very misguided or ill-considered. And then some that were very good. I think Ben and Jerry's did a really good job of talking about it, because they didn't talk about it as justice being served. They're talking about it accountability.
Yeah.
Which is even the case. So as a comms person, or who apparently they didn't talk to their comms person.
A lot of people did not consult their communication people
or their PR people. And at this case, but getting back to this as an opportunity to not just talk about social issues and things that people care about, but make them more thoughtful and impactful, and integrate them as part of their business. Because, you even have climate out there. Yeah. But a lot of them don't know how to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be real with you. There are a lot of people out there in the past 12 months since George Floyd was murdered, and, in the past couple of days with the Derek Chauvin verdict, there are a lot of folks out here saying a lot of different things that are either not consulting their communications teams in drafting their remarks, or, whatever they're posting as individual leaders or on behalf of the company. But to be honest, a lot of communications teams are ill-equipped to talk about racial equity and social justice. Right? I think we see a lot of folks of color that, might get sidelined to like diversity and inclusion roles and all of that. Mm-hmm. But do we see the many people of color who are communications professionals as communication leaders and who have a strong voice on their communications teams at these companies? I have seen drafts of work from big companies before, and they have been terrible. And my question is like, who is drafting this, right? And so I think, you can be the absolute most skilled communications leader and still have very little inkling on what the difference is between justice and accountability. Mm-hmm. So what the issue is do your communications teams have issue fluency when it comes to racial equity as it relates to our overall culture, our political climate, or what's going on within your own company? Is there any type of issue fluency whatsoever? And when I think about what's happening in your company, not just among your employees, but in the work that you do, like it's also in the work, in the products that you're working on, the ideas that you're developing, and like who it's impacting. And so, yes, I do think that companies have a lot of space, more space than they think, to talk publicly about social justice issues, racism, white supremacy. I think there are different degrees to which people feel comfortable in using these terms, but it is all possible. It's not as risky as they think. I've seen a lot of studies that show that not just employees, but even customers want to know like where these companies stand and want to see them standing up for issues of, social justice and equity, across different dimensions of diversity, race, gender, sexual orientation, whatever. So I do think there's been a lot of performative work that's happened. I think there's this pressure of, do we say something because everyone's saying something, or do we not say something because we don't have any way to back that up in any other part of what we're doing? I think people turn to Ben and Jerry's a lot because they're speaking about it publicly, but they have been standing on these issues for a really long time. And I think they're an interesting model too, because they talk very explicitly about like eradicating white supremacy, and they also sell ice cream. Like so there are companies that try to use the language of their business to talk about whatever the issue is. Like, I'm an ice cream company, why should I talk about mass incarceration? You know, where Ben and Jerry's is like, yes, we sell ice cream and we care about these social issues. Right? So you don't always have to make racism cute within, you know, if you're selling, you know, outdoor equipment. Like, okay, now let's just make racism talk about through the lens of the outdoors. You know, there are different strategies on how you can show up, ways that can feel authentic to your leader, authentic to the tone of your company, or authentic to the actual work that you do. And so my interest, I think, you know, racism is definitely not over just because Derek Chauvin, you know, was guilty on all counts. I'm really interested to see what these companies are going to do in the next 12 months. What work sustains, you know, and how are you going to actually do your work differently, both internally and externally, now that all the information is out there? People are getting points for talking about racism in ways that they weren't getting points before. So how can we lean into that to actually ensure that we're having different conversations next year? I think it would be very boring and disappointing that in 12 months from now, we're still trying to debate whether companies should speak out about social issues. We have to learn, we have to change. And any company that's still debating that next year, that currently exists right now, is just not paying attention, or they're prioritizing the performance of standing up for social justice issue to get whatever short-term gain they think they get from that. But in the long term, it's just not going to hold.
Or they just don't really think it impacts their business, or it has
There are a
anything
lot of,
to do with their business.
yes, there are a lot of leaders who don't care. Like, they don't care. And that is the tension. And there are a lot of companies who have a hold on their corner of the market that I don't think are going to like not exist next year because they're not standing up for against racism right now. And they know that. They're just trying to weather, you know, the storm of public opinion right now. And hopefully, you know, people get vaccinated and they start living their lives, and they're not going to pay attention anymore. I think it's up to everyone right now to keep this window of opportunity open as long as we can, so we can start changing the structures of what we're doing to create more opportunities for people of color, and also change the goals and the impact of the work that we're doing.
Can you tell me a little bit about the companies that you work with? And then also, as you're speaking to those audiences, what do those audiences look like?
Oh my God.
And how are they receiving you?
Yeah, so what I love about working for myself right now is that I get to craft my own audience. And I think that's important as communication leaders, to understand that the way you talk about something or how you're doing something creates the audience that you want. You know, I think a lot of times communicators are putting together collateral or whatever it is that they're doing, or companies are like, why can't we attract more people of color? Or why can't we attract whoever? And then you look at their comms and you're like, why would I come to you? Like, you're not incentivized
there.
Why would I want to work there? Like, there's nothing that is incentivizing me to do that. And so for me, understanding that, you know, the way that I crafted my TED Talk, the way that I, co-authored that Harvard Business Review article on imposter syndrome, and the way that I form like my public events is all through the lens of attracting as many people of color as possible. You know, I did an event like tips on public speaking, a workshop for women of color, right? Like public speak, like, you know, like how can I continue to frame things for us? And that gives me space when I do public events, when I'm talking about microaggressions, as an example, I'm talking about how we navigate it as people of color.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when we do work talking about racial marginalization, we end up marginalizing people of color in that process. Because when we talk about microaggressions, a lot of the work is like, what can you do, quote unquote, you, to stop microaggressions, right? Or to address it when it happens. Who is the you? I can't stop microaggressions. I'm just out here existing as a person and they're happening to me. And so there are ways that you create the audience in how you're talking about something. So as much as I can do in public events, I want to try to fill that gap in creating content specifically for folks of color, because there isn't a lot of content when it comes to like anti-racism or what have you, that's actually for us. And so that's been going really well. And in this virtual world, you know, the best way to engage with people, I love the chat. Like I'm all about the chat. And I copy pasted a chat once into Google Docs, and it was 35 pages long of people just engaging with each other and talking to each other, sharing stories about things that have happened to them, strategies that they've used, and creating some community, especially now because, you know, our communities have always been in, I don't want to say vulnerable, but there's so much stress right now in just existing, and this hyper visibility as being a person of color, especially a Black person, but hyper invisibility at the same time. And so the work that I do is that I want people of color to be seen as much as possible. When it comes to my clients, I do a lot of public speaking and engagements with majority white audiences, and I try to be, I used to be a teacher briefly. And so there's this sense of being tough but loving. And I think a lot of times when it talks to issue about race or racism or any types of level of discrimination, you know, there's a lot of fragility that white folks bring into the conversation because they don't have a lot of exposure in talking about race. And I think there's this sense of trying to defend whether or not they're a good person. Like I'm still a good person, right? So it's a sense of like, can you hear what I'm saying right now? And so what I try to do when I speak to majority white audiences is to treat them as adult learners. Hey, you have a lot of choices and options and agency here. You can make a choice that shows your values around racial equity, or you can choose to not show your values around racial equity. That is what's on the table here. And so what do you want to do? What do you care about? What matters to you? Okay. And what do you think, you know, you can do to make a difference? And so I think people have been receiving that well. I mean, I think the evidence of that is that I still work for myself and I didn't have to go find a company to work for, you know, and still pay my bills and buy all my dog treats. And so that has been going well. But I think it is important to, as you talk about leaders managing multiple audiences, as an entrepreneur, I manage multiple audiences, and those audiences are still, you know, I still speak to them in an authentic way, but I have to prioritize, like, what is the message that I want to share? And also, what is the project that they have based on their role in all of this work?
What are some of the social platforms that you use to engage with your followers and things?
This is a great question. My niece 6 years ago taught me how to use Instagram. She was 15 and I was like, please, can you, I'm trying to get on Instagram. Like, can you explain it to me? Like, I distinctly remember asking her, what's the difference between the @ sign and the number sign, like the pound symbol? Like, I didn't even have the language for hashtag at that point. So after she gave me an amazing tutorial, Instagram is my primary platform for me, Jodi-Ann, and also my podcast, Black Cancer. I am, when it comes to like the D&I space and my professional work, LinkedIn is where I have the biggest audience. What I have found interesting is in this past year, in the wake of George Floyd's murder, a lot of people have been trying to find like Black voices to hear from or whatever. That does not change how I show up on my social platforms. I still show up as me. I don't know what people are coming to me for, but people keep coming, and that's great. Another thing I've noticed since I started working for myself is the way I can show up on social media is drastically different than the way I was able to show up when I worked somewhere. And so I think maybe that's the draw for folks too, is that I can speak very openly about a lot of the issues that I see going on in companies. And, you know, one of the things I've been talking about a lot is when COVID-19 hit, diversity and inclusion departments were the first to like get furloughed or lose their jobs. And then a month later, when none of the financials shifted for those companies, when George Floyd was murdered, then they've been increasing personnel in diversity inclusion efforts. And so this sense of like, we don't have the budget is a false narrative, because they found the budget and the money, it just wasn't prioritized. So the fact that I can speak openly about that, because I'm not reporting to anyone, people find that very refreshing and I think cathartic, because they're seeing content that they wish that they could share, but they don't want to have a meeting with their managers about.
Do you think you're gonna ever create a Twitter account? Because there are a lot of voices out there similar to yours, but yours is unique as well. That would, how do you find people to collaborate with? Because as you write articles, as you have speaking engagements and panels, you're killing it.
I appreciate that. I do have a Twitter account. I'm just learning Twitter. I have a dear friend of mine who was the communications director at a company that we both used to work for. And she, like, we had a Zoom screen share session and she taught me how to use Twitter. Like, I didn't even know what the icons meant. Like, what's the difference between like a quote retweet and a retweet? Like, I'm still trying to figure Twitter out. And maybe, like, you know, for the communication leaders that are listening to this, as one human being, I don't know what one person's capacity is for how many social platforms they're on.
Okay.
I like to say it too, because I'm also managing like Jodi-Ann and my podcast. I think I'm trying to do stuff on Twitter, but I'm like, I need someone to probably do that for me.
You're being selective. It's going to come a time when you hire an assistant to do that. But I, from my own personal perspective, who uses social platforms,
yeah,
I love Twitter, and I think Instagram is it can be very powerful, especially now, and of course our LinkedIn platforms, because you have so many different audiences out there. But I also noticed out on the social platforms such as LinkedIn, where people are saying, I thought this was a social network, you're getting political, you're doing this is whether you're talking about race, whether you're talking about anything else, they don't think LinkedIn, they feel, is just for them to do certain things.
Yes, people need to stop. Like, LinkedIn users are so annoying because they get to determine and police what is professional and what isn't. And that whole environment also mirrors what happens within companies when you're trying to talk about racism, for example. You're just like, that has nothing to do with the workplace. Yes, it does. LinkedIn users are so obnoxious.
Well, and Madison Butler, who is the blue hair, she does a great job of handling that.
I know. She's a good friend of mine. And what she does on LinkedIn is absolutely incredible. And I think people don't understand the emotional labor and toll it takes to try to fight for space for yourself. And, you know, she's doing a phenomenal job, but she shouldn't have to be trolled and attacked daily.
For offering her perspective on something. Like, and she's very good about saying in her disclaimer, you know, no need to comment, you know, stuff like that if you don't have to. She's just giving you information.
Yes. And she gets attacked for that daily. And so just imagine like how that shows up in people's actual lives, that you can be concerned about your physical safety just for expressing your opinions. Like, that to me is is absolute nonsense. And then the fact that it's attached to where you work, like you're really emboldened to just be out here threatening people or trolling them for what?
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, my comment section on my social media platform, your free speech is not protected there. This is not a democratic space. I have an opposite approach than Madison. Like I will delete, I will block, like, because that is not, it's not worth it to me. That's not what I want to give my energy towards. And I think that a lot of comments can be so emotionally disruptive. And so I don't want to see that. And I don't want people who follow me to see that. And I delete stuff all the time. Like my comment section is not the space for your free speech. Feel free to take your opinions elsewhere. I've had people, you know, it's not hard to find my email addresses all over the internet, but people email me and just want to tell me like that I'm trash or like that I don't know what I'm talking about. Or, you know, they start trolling me in my inbox. Like, is that necessary? The internet is so vast. There are so many opportunities for you to just click, 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 and click away. Why do you have to spend the energy to harass and attack someone you don't know?
Yeah, that's true. Now, we're kind of winding down now, but what I wanted to do was for our listeners interested in working with you, getting in touch with you, how can they get in touch?
Well, I tell you where you don't go is Twitter because I don't know how to use it that well.
What is, can you write your website and email? You're so funny.
It's very easy to find me. You can go to my website. There's a contact form. My email address is there. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Follow me on Instagram. Listen to my podcast, Black Cancer. It's a podcast that talks about the lives of people of color told through their cancer journeys and long form narrative podcast. And so definitely check that out.
And on a personal note, I'm still looking for you to be at Essence Fest. You are doing
Claim
it. Claim it.
Somebody who works for Essence Fest, please hit me up.
Man, that is an amazing platform for you to speak your truth and, you know, be a voice there. I think it would be so awesome. But again, Jodi-Ann, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. We finally got you. And I finally got to share you with our listening audience, which is we have an amazing listening audience and we love our listeners. They always giving us really good feedback and things like that. But it's just a privilege to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much
for reaching out and inviting me to chat with you today. I'm always excited to talk with folks about these ideas. And so to do that with you just means so much to me.
You're listening to the Business Communicators.
Hattie, what an amazing job interviewing Jody. I thought it was a really fascinating conversation, and I think that our listeners are really going to get a lot out of it. And I heard a little rumor that, you know, you might be going on her podcast as well, which I'm excited to hear that as well.
Yeah, I may be. What I like about Jodi-Ann is that this is more than just a conversation about the myth of authentic self. It was also a great opportunity for communicators to hear all the takeaways and what they could use as they are working with their leaders and teams and how to integrate those kinds of conversations into their plans moving forward. Work is going to be different now, and it's really important that as work is changing and people are transitioning back to work, that they're able to be confident about coming to work and being themselves with that. So yeah, it was awesome. Love talking to her.
Yeah. So again, thanks to Jodi-Ann Burey for joining the Business Communicators this week. And, you know, I definitely wish that I could have been on the conversation, but Hattie, you carried it. You were a complete boss with that interview. So kudos to you. Hat tip to you. I would take off my hat and give you an actual hat tip, but got the hat hair rocking right now. So it's probably
peace sign, brother.
it's probably not worth it. But again, if you want to follow Jodi-Ann, you can just search for Jodi-Ann_B on Twitter, and their website is Jodi-Ann Burey, both of which are linked in the show notes below. But Hattie, let's go to one of my favorite, I think it's one of my favorite subjects or topics of the podcast, and that is our weekly writing prompts. And we actually did share last week on social media, we shared the writing prompt, which was, do you prefer online shopping or in-store shopping? We actually had some responses on LinkedIn, which I'll go ahead and put on the screen right now. But our first one is from Haley Ross, and she said she prefers online shopping because brick and mortar storefronts don't carry the inventory like they used to before the online shopping boom. I think that's 100% fair. I wrote back on there that, it's a bit frustrating sometimes when you take the time to drive to your retail shop and you're looking for a certain product and the color or size happens to be out of stock. It's the epitome of first world problems, but it does happen. So I totally get where she's coming from. But our other feedback was from Matt Castile, and he said, much like Thomas, I consider myself a hybrid shopper. For me, the actual act of shopping itself is best done online. The convenience factor of having a full inventory at my fingertips, all while browsing, and my barbecue stained undershirt and Batman pajama pants is unparalleled. However, I've worn similar attire during many late night Walmart trips, which may or may not have landed me on peopleofwalmart.com. So, Matt, I appreciate the laugh. I think we're going to put that on a t-shirt. That soundbite. I think it's absolutely great. So thank you to both Matt and Haley for sharing their insights. And Hattie, let's get to it. Tell me when to stop. I'm going to pick a page.
Stop.
All right. Tell me one, or I guess tell me left or right.
Left.
All right, 1 or 2.
1.
All right. The question for this week: how spontaneous are you?
Not as spontaneous as I used to be, and I'll tell you why. When I was younger, there would be no question about just picking up, going, taking a trip anywhere for a weekend, or taking a drive somewhere, or doing something that I'd never done at the last minute, that kind of thing. Now, because my life is a lot different, and I have to do a little bit of planning. I do have some spontaneity into me, but I do find more so than less planning how I'm going to be doing some things, but I still keep a little fun in it.
You got to. You got to keep things fresh. And I think as communicators too, it's sometimes fun to be spontaneous. Maybe try something new, and I think it sparks the creativity in us. To maybe think outside the box. But for me, I think I'd like to think of myself as spontaneous, but I also like to plan and have things a little bit organized to an extent. But I guess I sometimes make decisions quickly. And I shared with you Thursday that I actually booked a flight to Japan for January. And Hattie, do you want to guess what the price was? I mean, it was stupid. $225.
I'm not surprised.
$225.
I'm not surprised. Well, also, too, you got to remember this. It's probably cheap also because countries are just now opening up and airlines need business. So at this point, you could probably almost go free. But I thought that was the coolest thing that you did. And I said to myself, gee, I wish I could just do that.
It's a trip that I'm not sure is actually going to happen because there's still a lot that actually has to occur between, like, Japan's not even open right now to tourism.
Yeah.
But if it does happen, it will be in January of 2022, and for that price, and the tickets refundable. So you can, if it doesn't happen, you get your money back. It's not a huge deal.
Yep.
But that price is just too good to pass up. That
was amazing.
It's insane. It's insanity. So if you want travel tips, hit up myself, hit up Hattie. We'll let you know. We got you on the hookup. I mean, Hattie, you're focusing on travel right now too. How's everything going on that front?
That is very interesting. I'm learning so many things as an independent travel agent. And of course, this is my little side hustle, but it's still fun learning about all the great deals that are coming up and hotels and airlines and cruises. And anybody out there, summer's right around the corner. You're thinking about traveling? Hit me up. HattieJTravelAgent@gmail.com.
Definitely let Hattie know we were going. And yeah, just enjoy the summer, especially if you're vaccinated. Like, try to enjoy the time. I know it's been so long since many of us have been able to travel for fun. So yeah, definitely keep that in mind. But I am curious, Hattie, like, how was that? How has the side hustle maybe helped you as a communicator? Has it given you maybe a new insight and communication strategies, or maybe how you think about things from a comms lens?
Absolutely. One is, first of all, I always think about the end game. What is it I'm trying to accomplish? And
Right.
who is my audience? My audience is families, couples, groups, because that's where I'll get the biggest bang for my buck. People that are destination weddings, all inclusive resorts. So I know who I'm focusing on, and it helps me build my list and my target audience. So it's no different from building a communication strategy, because I have to promote what I'm doing too. It also lets me know the platforms where I can reach those people the most, such as my social media platforms. Email lists are fine at some point, but I got to go where everybody else is. And I got to research what the likes are of my audience, because I want to also provide the best customer service. And know what their wants are, what their desires are, and also to make sure that they're safe when they travel and they know all the rules and policies of companies. Places where their destinations where they're going as far as the safety policies, for vaccines and things. So it is really not that much different from being a communicator, but it's really good to exercise those muscles from a marketing standpoint.
I like that. It shows that it's that creativity, it's that spontaneity that we discussed, for the writing prompt this week. So let us know. Are you spontaneous? If so, tell us why. Tell us how. Maybe give us some insights into why spontaneity is important as a communication professional. Just go ahead and drop it in the comments below, or hit us up on social media. Just search @BizCommunicator on all the social media platforms. Also, feel free to contact us, podcast@ibchouston.com, or visit thebusinesscommunicators.com. But Hattie, it was a fun week, great episode, and if you can give us, maybe one nugget of information from your conversation with Jodi-Ann as sort of a takeaway, what is it?
Be open-minded. Be willing to have a conversation. And also, what I like about it, because later on we were talking about cautious coffee and about uncomfortable conversations. Some of these conversations, and it's about change. Be willing to be open to change, because it's all about not just doing the right thing, but understanding the value that diversity brings to the table, of having, the value that bringing the right people to the table. And that's something everyone can get something from.
Yeah.
But that's what I got.
It's all about listening to people, meeting people where they are, and talking with people that have different opinions than you, and have different worldviews than you. If you just speak with people that are just like you, have the same opinions as you, you're not going to grow as a person. And for some people, that's okay. They don't want to grow. They don't want to learn. But I think if you want to learn and you want to grow and better yourself, that's what you got to do. So
yeah.
Great conversation with Jodi-Ann and Hattie. Thank you so much for doing that interview. But if you want to follow Jodi-Ann Burey, we'll link her information in the show notes below, and be sure to check that out. But Hattie, it's been a fun week. Let's go ahead and wrap up this week's episode. So Thomas, we hope that you found the house that you wanted, and we hope that you do come back to the Business Communicators. But on behalf of our guest this week, Jodi-Ann Burey, and my co-host Hattie Horn, my name's Austin Staton. We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to the Business Communicators. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and leave us a 5-star review.